Hi, so welcome to this. It's sort of an update for the Retribution Paladin in Legion, only I'm not calling it an update because I'm not going to go through all the changes in this build because this is a self-contained thing. I think that we've had some definite news that will last through the rest of the alpha, so this particular video will be just as relevant in a month or 2 months, I believe. So I'm just going to call it problems. But it's not meant in a negative way. I'm just going to set out what our issues are going to be, what our differences are going to be to how we play in Warlords of Draenor. Because one thing a lot of people have asked me is how we're going to play in Legion, because I want to know whether I should stick with Ret or re-roll 2 Ret or not stick with Ret and roll something else. So I think I can give you a bit more positive information now. So the build came out. Initially, Blizzard said, there's been some changes to level 100 talents to make them a bit more competitive. In actual fact, you have very few, but I'll go over that when I do the Update 9 video. But something very interesting happened. I posted my response on the Alpha forum. The Alpha was up before I had to go to bed, which often it isn't, so that was fine. So I was able to get a response in there. And pretty quickly, although I didn't see it until I got up the next morning, got a response. So we've been asking for a response for several weeks and not been getting it. And the issue is it's very difficult to provide feedback when it's a one-way process, because we don't, when we're providing this feedback and nothing's happening with it, it's like, well, are they ignoring it? Or are they working on it? Do they agree with us? Do they not agree with us? We have no idea. So they responded, and this is what we've got. What I said is that in terms of our mastery for AoE, this is the big thing. We've been talking about this for some weeks, and what I made the point that it's just so difficult to provide feedback, as I say, because there's an obvious fix, a really obvious fix, and that is that we change the debuff to a buff on us, and it solves all the problems. But they're not doing that, and it's such a simple fix that we're thinking, well, and I said, look, is this because you have a design philosophy that won't allow it, and you're therefore working on something else? Because this is clearly not happening. It's not working. So we actually did get a response from Celestalon. So what he said is, you can see here for yourself, I'll read it out. It's intended that Mastery is a single target DPS stat for Retribution Paladins. So in other words, it is absolutely intended that we do not use our Mastery for AoE. Now, before I go on to the rest of the post, you can see it yourself there, of course. The issue now becomes that for single target, for pure single target, Mastery is a very powerful stat. It has always been for us ever since Mastery was put into the game. Mastery is a good secondary stat for Paladins and is usually the main one. We enchant Mastery, we gem Mastery, we take gear with Mastery on it. Mastery, we almost say Mastery and almost anything else. The value of Mastery sort of changes a little bit. I mean, in Warlords of Draenor at the moment, it changes according to whether you've got Final Verdict or Empower Seals or Seraphim. With Final Verdict, Mastery is better than it is with Seraphim or Empower Seals, but it's very strong for all three of those talents. Now, the problem here becomes that our Mastery goes from being a very, very powerful stat, one that we should load up on our gear, to having zero use. It literally goes to zero. Now, this is a huge problem because, people are even talking about and missing the point entirely. Oh, it means you have to have 2 sets of gear. No, that's not realistic. And the reason is because, again, people are thinking, and the developers are talking in terms of fights being single target or AoE, but they're not. You do have some fights that are pure single target fights. There are no AoE fights. Okay, you get the odd one like Hellfire Assault, which people don't even consider a fight. Okay, but there aren't any AoE fights. There are fights with AoE on them. But even that, think about in Hellfire Citadel, what have you got? You've got Cormrock with the hands. You've got Zul'Harak, okay, especially with the ads in. And often there's another like mini boss up for most of the fight. You've got Manaroth again, Imp spawn in. So there's very significant periods of AoE where it's really important and very tight DPS checks. But in all other respects, they're single target fights. So in those fights, you need to be able to do good single target damage and switch to good AoE damage as well. So it's not a case of two sets of gear. It's a case of we will have our gear for single target, and when it comes to AoE, we will be much weaker. Now, he goes on to say, but the greater judgment talent can extend that to AoE. It will be tuned to account for that. Now, this is where I have a big problem, because I don't believe it's mathematically possible to tune it. And here are my reasons. I've probably gone through them before. One is, let's forget about AoE for a minute, and let's actually still talk about single target. So a single target fight where a priority ad spawns and we have to switch to it. Well, let's say it's some distance away, and fights like this exist. They're already in, like for Legion for testing. So you switch to it, but it's not going to last very long. So you're using execution centers, let's say, because you're single target. What do you put? You don't put your execution centers on the ad because it'll never hit. It's going to die. So you put that on the boss. Now, where do you put your judgment? Do you put the judgment on the ad because you're going to use Templar's Verdicts, they're finishers. But then if you do that, it's, you know, you might not be able to get it on the boss in time for when the execution sentence falls. So a lot of damage is not going to benefit, and that's a single target fight. Then we move to AoE. Now you can see here's a situation, absolutely classic. Load of ads come in, so I can use my Greater Judgment, sure. 3 of those ads that you see there are getting that Greater Judgment debuff. That's it, just 3. All the rest are not. So it's not extending it to AoE. It's extending it to a small number. And obviously, the more ads there are, the less powerful it is becoming. Then, of course, there's our Divine Storm, which is a trait on our Ashbringer that makes our... Divine Tempest, I should say, sorry. That makes our Divine Storm do its AoE damage, but move forward 20 yards. So it's like the Demon Hunter's Eye Beam. Well, it's not going to work for that because the range of the Greater Judgment applying its debuff, although better than it was a few builds ago, is still not great. It's certainly not extending out 20 yards. So, and then the other thing, and I didn't actually even mention this in my reply because it's a much lesser concern, is they say that this is an AoE talent. It's in direct competition with Zeal. Like, when would you ever take Zeal, which is like cleaving, thing that makes your Crusader Strike cleave under certain conditions. And you wouldn't, because you would use the Greater Judgment. So it's going to make AoE and target switching, not just AoE, very complex. Great for me. Get to do some nice little guides. Get to do extra YouTube video guides. But not great when we're actually playing it. Now, I am going to just balance this out, rather than sort of make it sound like the world's falling in, by pointing out I was talking to a warrior in my guild. Now, it's basically, I mean, people have called it Colossus Smash, and I sort of thought, well, yeah, it's very similar to Colossus Smash, and the mastery is very similar to Arms Mastery. Apparently, it's exactly the same. So, think of Judgment as being Colossus Smash, because apparently in Legion, Arms Warrior's mastery works entirely through Colossus Smash, just like our mastery works entirely through Greater Judgment. Judgment, and then we get the talent Greater Judgment to extend it a little bit, just like they have a talent that does something similar but not quite the same. So basically, we're Arms Warriors. Now, when we get that into our heads, when we think about, we're Arms Warriors without an Execute, of course, and without Blade Storm for AoE, and without a charge, and without all those other things. But in terms of this, we are Arms Warriors, you know, so much for class fantasy. But here is the issue. If you're okay with that, then this is fine. You'll be okay. If you are not, if that is an aspect of gameplay that you really can't be doing with, I think this is set in stone. I say think, I've got to qualify this. There are some people who don't. My reason for thinking that this is set in stone is that we have been asking for feedback, I certainly have, and so I know others have, for weeks, and we've not had a sniff. We haven't had a response, not a thing said about Retribution Paladins since Calgon came in and distracted us all with their quality. That was a long time ago. So they have kept very, 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 very quiet. All of a sudden, they have responded to my post and Sol Sacra's post in a very short space of time, two separate members of the Blizzard development team, which is great. In fact, I did a video just last weekend on the issue of feedback and how I think Blizzard would get a lot more out of the community if they just changed a couple of things. In fact, I'll put a link to that there if you haven't seen that. So it's really good that they're now engaging. But the way I analyse this is I think to myself, we've only had very brief changes. It's sort of been tweaks and tunings mostly the last couple of builds. And now, and we didn't have any responses at all. Now we're suddenly getting a couple of responses. It's like they're saying, this is it, we're set now. We're still going to tune you. You know, they're still going to tune abilities, but the abilities are as they are. So I think it's set. The only thing that would ever change anything, I think, would be a concerted voice saying to Blizzard, we do not want this. But I have to say, even though on 3 points, I'm going to say, when I've read forums and looked at Twitter and all the rest of it, the Ret community has been pretty consistent with not liking the way Greater Blessings are going to work, not liking the fact that our mastery is tied to this Colossus Smash type effect, and not liking the fact that it doesn't extend to AoE. There are some other issues as well where people have been, you know, some people have talked about and some people haven't, like the mobility and survivability, stuff like that. But in terms of things that people have consistently agreed on, it's those three. But even then, people haven't really been saying it on the feedback forums. So you could well understand why Blizzard are just thinking to themselves, the people who are complaining are just a few gobshites like myself who have an issue with it, because there isn't the concerted background chatter saying to Blizzard, don't like this, don't like this, don't like this, don't like this, don't like this. It's the same people doing it. It's not like a large number of people. And although on the, you know, in terms of the alpha feedback forums, only alpha testers have access to that, nonetheless, there are, you know, forums where we could post this and Blizzard would still see it. And just people haven't been doing that. So I think it's set in stone. I think that's it. So this is one aspect of the overall toolkit, I think, as it is. It hasn't changed. The overall toolkit hasn't changed since last week. So I did a full daily in my update 8A. I'm going to put a link here as well to show you that. If you haven't seen that, it's a long one. It's over an hour. But of course, there's timestamps there. You don't have to take it all in one go. You could watch it a bit. But I think that is set. I will not be at all disappointed if I'm wrong on that, but I doubt I am wrong. So this is how we're going to play. Don't worry about damage numbers still. Tuning is still going on. I'm still reasonably confident about that. I just think there are certain situations when we're going to have a hard time. Not necessarily an impossible time, but think in terms of it is Colossus Smash. That's what we've got. That's what our playstyle is based around. If you're okay with that, you might well be okay with the spec. If you are absolutely not okay with that, then, you know, you have the information you need to be able to make your decision, I think. So hopefully that's been useful to you. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. And if you've got any questions, again, you know, put those in the comments. I will try and get back to you. And until next time, I'll see you later.